shall we? Hello. Hello. That's better. There you go. Thank you very much. My name's Tony Wachiku. Thank you for coming to CDR. Who's here for the first time? A few of you? Okay, cool. You are welcome, as they say in Nigeria. Cool. So yeah, CDR is all about producers, artists, creating safe spaces for people who make music to share what they're working on. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause for the tracks that were played earlier, man. That's really amazing as ever. And it's also a great opportunity for us to kind of have conversations and dialogue with artists that, you know, we feel passionate about. And this young woman here is no exception. Give it up.
Thanks.
Nabihah. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm a bit ill, but so sorry my voice is going to sound like this for the talk, but I'm fine, yeah, I'm okay.
Your voice sounds fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like Marty Funkhauser, but hopefully it'll get back to normal soon.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why you've got a husky voice is that you've been obviously very busy on the road, right?
Yeah, I just got back from a 4-month straight trip touring, so yeah, it was quite. I knew this was going to happen. This happens every time, you know, when you're just like on tour and like, oh wow, I haven't got sick yet. And then as soon as you stop, then
it kicks in. Yeah. Well, thank you for making time to join us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we kind of kick off and, you know, delve into the kind of technical side of this track, I just wanted to circle back to your debut album of 2017, and you know, obviously that was a big moment for you. Upon reflection, can you give us your thoughts on how, you know, post making that album and obviously releasing it and living with it, you know, have you got any kind of reflections on that initial experience?
When I think about making Weighing of the Heart, I feel compared to making Dreamer, at the time, obviously it was like the biggest, hardest thing I'd done. But then now in comparison, it just felt, it felt like an easy time. I guess it's like, you know, when you've done your GCSEs and then you do A-levels, you're like, GCSEs was not as bad. I don't know, that's like a geeky comparison, but you kind of go to this next stage. Well, it's because a lot of different things happened. But, you know, when I made Weighing of the Heart, I got funding from PRS, which meant that I could rent a music studio for the first time in my life. And so that was like a really special moment for me. And then with that money and like having the space, I basically like dedicated my whole time to being like, right, I'm going to try and make an album. And so it's, you know, sort of like first foray into that. And everything, all the music I was making, it was emotional, but it was like kind of like maybe me thinking about slightly more like abstract ideas, whereas on Dreamer it's really linked to things that happened to me and stuff I went through, and it feels emotional in a different way. So
in a lot of ways, Dreamer was like a growth, you know, kind of a further development. Yeah. But in order to get to the Dreamer that we know, you kind of had a couple of stumbling blocks, didn't you?
Yeah, I had quite a few actually.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me to make this album, and in the end it took 5 years to make it. Because, I mean, the one thing that most people know about was that after 2 years of working on new music, my music studio got burgled. I was in Somerset House, just on the other side of the river.
Oh, wow.
And I obviously learned the hard way about backing up, because I didn't back up. Yeah, someone's just broke in, like stole my computer and stuff. So I just lost everything. And at the time I was really in shock. Like I couldn't speak, because I was like, wow, I'd really nearly finished enough tracks for the record. So yeah, that was intense. But then at the time, people were trying to console me, and they're like, you know, maybe it happened for a reason. I was like, if one more person says that to me. But now, because it's like a year since Dreamer's come out, and now, yeah, I feel like, I don't know what happened that day, but it was meant to happen, because the music then turned out quite different to how it was, the direction it was going in. And I'm really happy with how the album turned out in the end. But yeah, that was one of the things that's like, other things happened, like I'd set a whole summer aside to finish the record, then I broke my hand and I couldn't do anything. And then I broke my foot as well, my ankle, and one of my best friends died. Then my granddad was really sick. Then, you know, it's COVID and I got stuck in Pakistan for a few months. But I don't want to say stuck because that sounds negative. It was actually good to be out there. But and then I got really sick as well, which is something that I haven't really spoken about a lot, not publicly, but I got really ill.
Wow.
And
So after COVID?
Yeah, no, like during it.
During, okay.
Yeah.
As in COVID related? Or
yeah, I had COVID as well. I just didn't realise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. 'Cause sometimes I feel like we just talk about everything, but basically there was literally a day where I was going to die. Okay. And so that moment changed a lot of things in my head. Yeah. So it's been really tough. And then I just felt so bad, like, because I was so ill. Like I felt weak in my head and my body, and it was really hard to like come back. Oh my God. I was like, it's a year later, I'm not going to cry. Like, literally.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. The thing is like, yeah, it was just really hard. And I always felt like I was mentally a strong person, but then I was really going through times where I was like thinking, I'm never going to be able to finish this music or make music or just get back to normal. But then somehow I did. Yeah. So when the album for me is like, it's just made me realize, like, once I'd finished it and now that it's out, how resilient the human mind and the body can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Blessings. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, despite losing, I mean, we've all lost data, right? You know, we've all lost tracks. How many of you lost tracks? Yeah. So we all know that one, right? But, you know, a whole album, that's quite a lot, right? Along with audio.
And there's so much mystery around it because the security guards wouldn't even let me see the CCTV or anything. And then one of them was like, do you think someone's targeting you? And I was like, where are all these questions going? Yeah. But anyway, the day after that happened is when I was in the studio with a police officer taking fingerprints. And that's when my grandma FaceTimed me from Pakistan, and she was just crying on the call and told me that my granddad had a brain hemorrhage and was in hospital, and that then just eclipsed the whole studio situation for me, because my grandfather, he's really my favorite person in the whole world. And then it was this kind of crystallizing moment where you realize that actual important things is really like the people around you that you care about, your family, whether it's your family or friends or whoever. So
definitely puts things in perspective. And so I guess you're having to think about the writing process and kind of, you know, essentially starting again with this, you know, with all that's going on. The fact that you approached the writing of the new album in a simplistic way with what you had, because my understanding is that you were obviously in Pakistan during COVID. You had none of your usual gizmos, so you only had access to very, you know, only a few things to work with, but in a way that was probably quite appropriate for where you were at the time. Would you say?
Definitely. It's just a culmination of different things that happened. Obviously, I'd lost all the work and I was feeling distraught about that. And then I went to Pakistan to go and see my grandfather. And this was in the beginning of March 2020. So, you know, it was like when the COVID lockdown thing was really getting real. And my mum and myself, we just booked last minute flights and went out. And even being at Heathrow that day was crazy because there was no one there. And I think there were like 7 people on the whole plane or something. And we went out for 2 weeks. We'd booked for 2 weeks. And the day we were supposed to fly back, the Pakistani government announced a strict lockdown and they just shut everything. So then I was there. It was the first time I'd ever been somewhere where I really had no idea of when I could go home. It was quite a strange feeling to have. Maybe other people in this room were also in similar situations in lockdown, but I literally didn't know when I was going back to London. And then in that limbo period, my granddad luckily recovered, and I told him about what had happened. He was like, look, like, don't be upset, just start again. You've got to keep going, just start the music again. And by the way, he was my number one supporter from day one. Amazing. When I decided, like, I'm just going to do music. So then I didn't have anything, so I went to a music shop and just bought an acoustic guitar. And that's literally what I had. That and making like voice recordings on my phone, which like they're probably still on my phone. Just just little ideas on the guitar and with my voice. And that was really like a kind of the incubation period,
Absolutely.
I guess, for Dreamer. But then, so that was the approach because of where I was and what I had access to. But on the flip side of that, it was also good for me because I didn't want to ever be in a situation again where I'd lost music and I couldn't remember what I'd done. Because I feel like if there's other people here as well who, work on Ableton or Logic, on your computer, and you just open up a new session, start a new idea, and you kind of just go with the flow, and maybe you're not really paying attention to every single part of what you're doing. And you're like, yeah, it's fine, I'll save it and I'll come back to it. And then if it disappears, then you just feel like you're kind of left in the lurch. Yeah. So even after that, when I came back to London, I stuck with the same very stripped back approach. And it's nothing revolutionary because it's just probably like the old school way of writing a song. But I just used a guitar, loop pedals, and also a harmonium, which I'd bought in Pakistan, and developed a lot of the ideas for tracks that way. And I didn't record anything for maybe like 8 months or something. Okay. Yeah, maybe 6 or 8 months, just kind of letting things go around in my head, letting them develop. And I've never worked in that way before because I'm so used to just starting something and be like, okay, I like how this sounds, I'll build a track up from there. I've never done this thing where before it's like, oh, I like this, but I'll just leave it in my head and I'll see where it goes. And actually things shifted in loads of different ways, and it was amazing.
What way? What was the strongest way?
I mean, just like, you come up with one idea and then maybe vocals or lyrics to go with it, but then actually those words would end up on something completely different later on, or like just ideas would they just grow and breathe, and you give them time to do that.
And it can be all interconnected rather than being kind of like, this is one project, open and save. It's almost like it's I guess a malaise of ideas that then, and you can synthesize them, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how did you then go from this kind of stack of voice notes to then getting them projects into Ableton? Because obviously they're not synced. They're not. There's How did you work with it?
So the first time where I was like seriously trying to put the music down together was probably in November of 2020. I got sick at the end of August, and then like August, September, October, literally that whole time I couldn't even move. So after that, because I was saying I was feeling really like depressed and stressed out in my head, and I had my studio here in London, but I was finding it really difficult to concentrate. I mean, there's like good and bad things to having a music studio in central London in a massive building where loads of your friends also have studios, because it's easy to just hang out or like go to the shops or, go and get a coffee again, whatever. So and then it was really frustrating me actually, because I didn't feel good about that. So I had applied for some other funding, which I also got, like COVID relief funding. And I used that to do a residency in Scotland in this place called Cove Park. I don't know if anyone knows it.
Tell us about Cove Park.
Well, it's amazing. It takes like 10 hours to drive there from here. And it's an artist residency place in this very remote bit of Scotland on the edge of of Loch Long. And it's actually next to the nuclear submarine Trident base, which is like the most high security UK military space. So I'm like, why is there an artist residency base also here? Surely it's a cover up. And when you spend time there every day, you start noticing very strange things. But I also saw a nuclear submarine for the first time in my life. Has anyone seen one? It's literally the size of like a Boeing 777 aeroplane, like the body of it. It's so huge, and it's black, and it's like, oh my God. So that's totally a digression. But anyway, I was looking at
an important detail though, do you know what I mean?
Important detail. Yeah. But anyway, it's this place that you go, and it's just really beautiful Scottish nature. They've got a main building, and then they've got like different little buildings across the land where artists stay, and there's no Wi-Fi. unless you're in the main section, and it's just like there's no people. It's a 2-hour walk to the nearest shop. There's hardly any people there, and I just went there. Yeah, I like logged out of Instagram, literally just like turned my phone off and just chucked it, and then and that's where I started doing the work of like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and actually try and develop these ideas, and that was also a new experience for me of going out of the city. You know, London. I'm from London, and London's always such an inspiration, and I love it so much. But to take myself out of the city into like complete nature and start working on music there was a new experience, and it went well. So then I ended up making basically this whole album in the countryside, because I went back to Cove Park again, and then like that time I was completely alone, because I'd been already, and then I asked to go over like Christmas and New Year, and they said, well, you've been here before, we're not open, we don't normally let anyone on the site, but because you've been here, you can come, but no one's going to be around. So I was like, it's fine, yeah, I'll just come back up. And then the night before I went, I watched this film in a cinema called Lamb. Did anyone watch it? So it's like Icelandic horror film about sheep in the middle of nowhere. And that was not a good thing to watch before driving up by myself to the middle of nowhere. Oh my God, like it was actually, I freaked myself out, because you know how sometimes countryside people, they freak out when they come to the city and they find it too busy. For city people, it's the other way around.
The silence.
When you look out the window at night and it's like pitch black. Because I always think if something happened to me now, like no one would even know. And then there was the groundsman who'd sometimes come up and he'd be like, I'm just trying to get away from my family. He's like, do you want some whiskey? And I was like, I don't drink. And he's like, just pull up a chair anyway. So it'd just be like me and him sitting by the fire. It was a very unusual experience for someone who's, you know, like grown up in the middle of London. But it was good. So I went there twice, and then I also went to this place in Suffolk called, it's called Snape Maltings. Does anyone know that place? It's got such a weird name. It was run by, it's part of an organisation called Britain Peers Arts, and it's basically the complex that was built by the English composer Benjamin Britten. It's in Suffolk, and they run residencies there, and they have a few properties in the town that he lived in called Aldborough, and so I went and stayed there. Also freaked myself out just by being, there was like these deer called muntjacs, and they make this sound that's like a blood-curdling scream. And I remember like it was actually the night that I'd made In Light, the track, and I was driving back. And actually this was an important moment for being in the countryside and feeling inspired by it, because I came out the studio and it was like a 10-minute drive back to where I was staying. And the night was so black, like it was the darkest, deepest night that I've ever experienced in my life. And it made me think that if I was in a city, I wouldn't notice, because every night in London is the same, you know, because the street lights come on and there's always people around and there's always the same noises and it's just bright. And so I had this moment where I really felt like, oh, it's so important to feel these things and experience these things. But yeah, on that dark, dark night, when I got back to the house, like I had to get out the car, open the gate and then drive in. And in that moment, there was a deer or something. I didn't actually know it was a deer, but I just heard this scream and it's like, and I ran into the house. I left the car on, the door was open. If anyone else was there, they would just be laughing at me. But I know these are all the funny little memories that I'm remembering of like making this album. But yeah, that's what happens when you go to the countryside to try and make a record.
So all these experiences in the Dreamer, I guess, in some respect. So should we have a quick listen to Dreamer, the actual end result? Oh, sorry, the track, the track from Oh yeah. So the track that I chose to do the deconstruction of today is This World Couldn't See Us, which is the most popular track from the album. But before I play it, I actually wanted to play this other track. So this that I found on here, which it was it was one of the tracks I lost, and it was basically a precursor to how this one's turned out. Let's see. Is this not? Should be there. Oh, is it switched to?
Hang on.
is coming, folks.
There. Okay, so that was one of the tracks that I lost the original file to. But I actually didn't even realize I had that version there. And then I found it.
Where did you find it?
Yeah, I found it. There's like another version as well that had guitars on it as well, but it's like I just have a rough recording of that on my phone. Like it could have been cool. But basically, I wanted to play it because even though I lost it, that track for me basically was the precursor for two of the tracks that are on Dreamer. One was obviously This World Couldn't See Us, and it's the drum beat. I was really sad I lost that drum beat because actually the drums on this track I'd made whilst I was working in another studio in Devon, actually. It's called Devon Analog Studio. And
Great spot.
Yeah, such a good spot. Oh, so I was using all these really cool drum machines to make that, and I love like the pitched kick drum sound on that, which I've just obviously lost. And then the synth parts, I feel like those high synths are what you hear on Sky River, like that developed into a track. But I really wanted to recreate the like energetic drum pattern that I'd lost here. And this one, you know, sometimes when I make music, I don't really think about like, oh, this is going to be inspired by this or blah, blah, blah. Like it's just kind of subconscious. But for this one, it was inspired by the B-52s because I was listening. They're one of my favorite bands, and I was listening to them a lot. And I just love the way that like they have this like driving energy in the drums, and it's not like dance music, but there's something really, there's something that really like moves it along. So I was trying to channel some of that in this, and then. So for This World Couldn't See Us, I was thinking that we could watch recap the track by watching the music video for it, which was filmed in London in one night by this really cool filmmaker and photographer called Ruben Bastian Lewis. I don't know if anyone's familiar with his work, but he does a lot of stuff with King Cruel, and I was just a really big fan of his, and I've known him for a few years, so I asked him if he'd be up for me making this. I think it's probably like exactly 1 year since we made that video, just a bit over.
How does it feel to watch it, again? I mean, you must have seen it about 3 trillion times.
I haven't actually watched that video for a while now. I mean, I watched it 3 trillion times when we were when it was coming out. But yeah, that was the first time we watched it in a while. I feel happy. I feel so happy and good about the music on this album, especially because now it's been, in 5 days it'll be exactly 1 year since it came out. So to just be reflecting on the past year of it and like how that track's traveled as well and how people respond to it. Yeah, it's been amazing.
So before we dive into the project file, tell us a little bit about, you've talked a little bit about how the initial ideas came about, but then specifically how did this track grow, post B-52's influence?
So the first thing that I did that I came up with was the drums, because I was sad that I'd lost that track and I was trying to recreate it. I wasn't using the same drum machines because that was obviously like in a specific studio. For this one, if I remember correctly, I think it was, it's definitely, so one drum machine that I love using, which is such a basic one, but it features on a lot of my things, it's just the Alesis SR16.
Sorry, say that again.
Alesis SR16.
The SR16.
Yeah.
The SR16.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Does everyone know the SR16? Okay, cool. You need to check out the SR16 because it's one of the worst drum machines that was ever created. I mean, there's a couple of cool kits on there, but generally speaking, it's cheap and cheerful, but not in a good way.
Yeah, but you can manipulate it.
Yes, you can.
That's why it's funny, because I know like it's really basic, but I actually love some
but
of
that's
the
also the
sounds
beautiful
on
thing about that's what's great about music, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also the sound palette of a lot of the drum sounds on there, like very like 80s, like the epic drum sounds. And obviously all this music is quite 80s influence. So this, for me, that whole era of music, I think why I love it so much is because of the emotion that all the musicians just managed to convey through, like whether it was like the guitar track or the drums or the vocals or the synthesizers. Just when, I don't know, there's no other era of music that has that kind of like
immediacy.
So that's what I was thinking about. But yeah, so just taking hits from that, and then also I was doing this other residency in Switzerland, where we got a chance to go to the biggest synth museum in the world. And then for a week we were working with some of the drum machines and things. So I had some hits that I'd recorded of those drum machines, like from an original 808 and some other stuff. I can't even remember all of it. And I think let me just solo the drums. I think that's
that'd be really useful.
Yeah, I feel like the cowbell was from a different drum machine. And I think I had to work as well to find that clap sound, because that's one of the clap sound that I lost on the original file. And that might have even been from like a plug-in kit from one of the complete Native Instrument ones. I don't know how everyone else works with drums here, but if you're using like MIDI drums, do you record them in as audio afterwards and then work on the audio, or do people stick to MIDI? 50-50. So if I'm using any MIDI sounds, I'll record them into another track straight as like an audio, as like a waveform, and then work on them from there.
Is that why'd you do that?
Because I feel like once you've got like the actual like audio recording, then you can just like, I don't know, do a lot more with it, like manipulate it in different ways. And
is it because it's visual as well, do you think?
I've never thought about that, but maybe, because I guess like all the hits look different as well. But I think it's more about the sound and then what you can do with it as well afterwards. Sure. So that's why like you've got this like, and everything is split up on a different track.
Cool.
The drums.
Is there much processing on your drums?
I can't remember. I should have looked at this one. No, there's not that much. Because when I was working with with the mixing engineer who did my last album, Weighing of the Heart. He's called Steve Sedgwick. And when we were mixing the album, I sat with him in the studio for like, I think we did it over 10 or 11 days. And, you know, it was, so my old studio was in Damon Albarn's building. And so it was in the big like live room and studio down there that we mixed it in. And so it was just like all this amazing gear. And it's the first time that I'd had that experience. And it was really a learning experience for me. And one of the things that I learned from Steve was like how much you can do with just like EQ and compression. And because that's all he was really doing. Like obviously he was running it through a Neve desk and then using all these like really nice like outboard compressors and EQs, but he wasn't doing like anything crazy, but it was just really enhancing the sound.
The analog signal flow, basically, the kind of I guess the warmth of good old transistors and capacitors. Yeah.
One day I'll make a studio, inshallah. But yeah, so there's not that much on it, and then but I think so it's just like on each thing. So just EQ and compression. Oh, the clap's got like a filter on it. Everything just like very minimal individually, but then when you like on the whole like drum on the group on the. Then just like EQ and compress the whole thing as well, just to kind of like make it all come together.
Yeah. So no effects per se, just like I said, just
no,
EQ.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think there's.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
No. Maybe. No.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of the sound and character has come from the EQ, obviously the samples themselves.
Yeah.
The good old trusty SL16 et al. And then just the processing, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's a lot about your source sounds being really close to what you want, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. But that's just also the feeling of this particular track. Yeah. So, for example, with more of the electronic ones, like Sunflower, those drums are way more processed. There's a lot of filters in them. And there's like, you know, like all the kind of hi-hats, like are really filtered. And the kick sound is really different because it's like more like clubby, like driving. So, yeah, we'll just have different processing on it. So yeah, the drums came first in that, and then the second thing that came from this track, I think, was just like the synths. And one of my things of like listening back to this track and also having performed it live now and listening to live arrangement is that like a little peeve I've got with this is that I should have actually been more critical of just having this line just running through the whole thing. I mean, obviously it changes in the chorus sections, but one thing that I want to do more with the the next music I make, whatever it is really think more about like space and silence and like all the gaps in between. I feel like with electronic I don't know, with the stuff I make, it's really a lot about layers and textures, and I love like having these big synth and pad sounds, but it's easy to just get lost in that and not be like more kind of critical of the space. Sure. Yeah. So, and this was, it changes like, it's just basically that line and then the chorus. Oh yeah, wait.
And was this the same process first? Were they MIDI, then you bounce, and then they're straight up? Or they straight up stimps?
No, so these ones were in the first place where I did my residency in Suffolk. I was staying in this house, and inside the house there was this old like Yamaha upright like electric piano, and it had different settings on it, and so I was just messing around on there, and there was this one kind of like strings sound, and it's from that. And I just like took the outs from that and put it into my sound card and recorded it in, and I don't even really remember like what the model of the piano was or anything, but I like the sound.
But the sound works, right?
Yeah, the sound worked. And so then I had the drums and that just basically like the first bit just like on a loop for ages, because then you think about like what else you want to put in. And then I think I must have come up with the bass line where let me check if this is okay, this isn't showing that. So a lot of my bass lines that I was doing on guitar but I didn't have a bass guitar, and then I would just like pitch them down.
Okay.
But I don't think I did that.
As in record it in as guitar and pitch it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
But this one's not pitched down. Yeah. But is there another bass?
Maybe further down.
No. Maybe I think we added in a bass part in the mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't have that. And then yeah, this is just the yeah.
Good old guitar rig.
I use Guitar Rig a lot. I really like it. I think it has like really good quality effects, and I like putting a lot of different things through them. Like it can sound really good with drums, vocals, yeah, just loads of stuff. But it's like very minimal on this one. It's just the effects on that guitar part. Cool. Yeah, and then the hardest thing for me on this track was the vocals, because I spent months trying to figure out what kind of vocals I wanted on this track, and
as in the style.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The style. I at the beginning I was like really adamant about the vocals being sung on it, but I tried so many different things and nothing felt right, and it was really frustrating me. And then I actually left the track for ages, and then I don't know, I think maybe someone else I played it to was like, oh, maybe try the spoken word vocals on it, but I didn't know if I wanted to do that on this one. But then in the end I was like, let me just try. I'd already written the words, so all the lyrics for this track, they're inspired by the best book that I've ever read, which I was reading whilst making the album, and it's by Thomas Hardy, and it's called Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Has anyone read it? 1, 2 people. Okay, well, it's like the most depressing book you could ever read in your whole life, but it's so amazing. But yeah, I don't know, it's just about this girl, and she just wants to like she just wants to live and be happy, and literally at the start of the book she gets raped and she gets pregnant from the rape, and then she goes back to her village. This is like, it's Victorian England. She goes back to her village, and then she's ostracized from the whole community because she's pregnant out of wedlock, and then gives birth to this baby, and she can't get it baptized or anything. And then after 2 weeks, the baby dies, and then she has to bury it herself, like on a stormy night. And then that's literally like chapters 1 and 2. And then you're like, so then you think, okay, well, it's going to get better from here, surely. And it just doesn't. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse the whole way through. And it made me really get obsessed with Thomas Hardy as an author. Now I'm trying to read all of his books. I've read 8 or 9 so far. But I've taken a break because like 9 Victorian tragic novels in a row where like everything is just so bad. And when if you're not feeling that good in your head anyway, then it's not really a good idea.
Well, maybe you channeled some kind of optimism from those stories into your music. Maybe,
maybe. But so that's what all the words are about that. And I actually originally wrote the words, and they were on a totally different piece. That was just an ambient guitar piece that I was doing with a loop pedal, and I was performing it live in this kind of interim period before between the 2 albums. Just with a loop pedal, and then doing the lyrics over it. And
I guess you just recorded the spoken word in yourself, right? Just on this project, or
The recording of the vocals is I don't know. I did it in a funny way because where are they all? Oh yeah.
Is that another residency experience?
Yeah. Oh, that's the end. Where are all the other bits? Oh, I don't know where some of the vocals are missing. This only has the end bits in it.
That's right. Well, talk us through how they were recorded. And
that's weird. Oh, okay. I need to figure that out. The vocals, I recorded them. So, I was going around in my head about figuring out how to do them. And then it was getting to yeah, so I figured out that I wanted to do them spoken word and recorded them in, but I wasn't happy with the recording. Most of this album I made, I wasn't working in like a purpose-built music studio, because I was doing this on Residency, so I just had like a room to work in, and I actually quite prefer that. Sometimes, like, to have more of the sound of the space in it, as long as it's not crazy. So what happened with this one is this is the last day, and I was just like, I've got till 4 p.m. before I have to leave, and I need to finish this track, otherwise I'm going to be, you know, when you just want to finish it to be like, I finished. So I was like, I have to redo them. But then the room that I was working in for this last final bit of the Residency was actually not a good room to work in at all for music.
Why, was it really ambient or something?
Yeah, it was really ambient, and it was originally a pottery studio. And it had like a very unusual design where it had this like a really high ceiling, and this whole ceiling was slanted like that. I don't know, it was like a unique space. But I mean, I asked if they could put me in a different one, but they're like, this is the only one we have available. Somehow I made it work, but then for the vocals, there was no way that I could stand by the mic and record them nicely. So then I had to do this thing where I got like a massive towel and then just like held it up above me to make like a weird vocal booth. And that house is next to this place called the Red. It's on the grounds of this place called the Red House, which is the house that Benjamin Britten used to live in. And it's basically like a National Trust kind of place. And so I was standing by this massive window of this like weird room under a towel, like trying to record vocals, and I just had to hold it up with both arms. And then there were all these old people like walking past to go into the house, and they were literally just like, they'd be staring like, what is going on in there? Because they must it must have looked really weird, because obviously they couldn't hear anything, so they didn't know what I was doing. So they were just like, this girl's holding this towel above her head and she keeps coming out of it like every few minutes. But that's how I recorded those vocals. It could have been done in a better way, but somehow I made it work. And then in the mixing and mastering process as well, like, could work more on the vocals to just like make them sound closer to how you want. But it's annoying that I don't know why they're not in this version, because it would have been cool to just hear them by themselves. Yeah. But it doesn't matter.
And I'm guessing that it doesn't matter. It's fine. I mean, your story more than makes up for it. So in terms of the processing, I'm assuming given that a lot of what you've done here is focusing on just some compression and some EQ, I guess, just in terms of just getting some basic control and tonality from the vocal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I really learned that from Steve. Like, with the processing, you don't need to do that much to make. Like, I made this track sound, but no, that's weird that the vocals aren't in it, because obviously the vocals were playing in the track, weren't they? Are they not?
No, I think we heard of
Silence was the song of love.
Like, maybe they were.
When life lived in dreams.
Yeah, there we are.
And time fell like rain.
So that's got.
When all the summer flowers were for you and me.
Yeah.
When life tasted sweet.
Didn't even put.
And like fate was a friend.
Is that your guitar rig on there as well? So it's probably some kind of chorus effect or something.
Cool verb.
Yeah.
Fire breather. That wasn't.
Yeah. Oh, some chorus there. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like really pretty minimal, to be honest. Yeah. And then that was the vocals that I recorded under the towel in the big room. But and it's on the finished version.
I think the Reddit threads are going to go a bit wild now.
Yeah.
The Nabihah towel recording technique. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it should be like a testament to the fact that you can make it work, wherever you are. Sometimes I feel like you can feel quite intimidated, like, oh, I don't have the right gear, or I don't have this, I don't have that. The most important things, I think, like, you have to have like if you can have a really good sound card, like an audio interface, that makes a massive difference, and good microphones, and But like in terms of the space, but then also you hear some tracks that are like anthemic, and they were recorded in really basic ways as well. so like Joy Division and things like that.
Well, I was going to say, because this feels very Joy Division
Does
to
it?
me. Yeah.
I need to get an aerosol can like for my for the
Exactly.
next album. This little.
No, I mean, obviously, each track is going to be different, but what I like about this track is that it's almost like this is a canvas, right? And it's a mix of captured recordings, whether it's a string ensemble sound from a Yamaha keyboard or your vocal, and it's come together quite naturally, Would you agree that way it came?
I think that maybe other people as well here who make music will agree that to get to that like creative epiphany moment where you're like, this is going to be a track that I like, that you feel happy about, it takes hours. And you might be like in the studio for literally days and you feel so frustrated that you're not getting any good ideas and you keep deleting things and starting again and you just hate it and you're like, what's the point? Oh. And then you get to that moment where suddenly you just come up with one thing and you're like, this is it, this is the gateway. And then you'll write like the kind of like skeletal version of a whole track really quickly. That's my experience. But to get to that point, you can't just get there. It's like a labor of love. Absolutely. So you have to go through that whole process. So yeah, this came to the way I'm talking about it now. It's like, oh yeah, I did this and then I did that and then it was ready. But it's not really like that. Like it takes a long time and it's really hard to make even one track. And then after that as well, so you don't know whether people will resonate with it or not. You just never know.
But also with this, it's like, I like the fact that, it came together over a period of time from residency to residency. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. A lot of people we all work in different ways. Some people obviously will work at home on one track, headphones, focusing, loads of plugins. But this has come to life in lots of different on travels, right? Would you say?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different elements in it, and not so many plugins. Like, this is a very like played track. I'd say it's like there's not a lot of there wasn't any MIDI in it. Maybe there was just for some of the drum sounds. Yeah, there might have been originally, but and it took a while. It took a while to get it to the end product. And then like and then obviously then you have the mixing and the mastering phase, which changes.
We'll talk about that in a second. I'll see if these guys have got any questions that they'd like to ask. If you have, just stick your hand up. We have a mic. Okay, cool. Oh, there's one here. Right.
How do you get past like becoming too attached to one version of a song? Like, it evolves, but sometimes that first idea, you want to hang on to it a lot. How do you get past that?
Well, as in like, I mean, if you really want to hang on to it a lot, maybe it's because it's good and you like it. But maybe, getting past it. Sometimes space, like, when you listen to something too many times and then it just doesn't really make any sense to you. Sometimes I won't, so I'll leave the track and then I'll come back to it after a few weeks or something. And then when you listen to it with fresh ears, that can make a massive difference. And I don't play. I just have like a couple of people that I'll share the music with in the process of making it. People whose opinions like I really trust and that I know will give me good feedback, like as a friend, but also as like a critic, whatever. So that's also a good way. Like if you are feeling like you're stuck on something, to just play it to someone else and and just tell them to be really honest and tell you what they think. But space. Maybe just starting a new track as well. And then whilst things are still in your head, then maybe it will go in a different direction. I don't know. It's different for everyone. But if you're really stuck, like if you're really hanging on to it, maybe it's because it means something and it could develop into a good idea.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Cool. Question here.
And one other.
Nice one, mate.
Hey, I was just wondering with this track, is there any looping or is it all played? Everything just played.
Oh yeah, no, there's loads of looping. There's well, I mean, like the drums, I would have made like the initial pattern and then like just copied and pasted it, but then changed it in the places, like just rearranged it in the places where the pattern changes a bit. And then the synth, the like main synth that runs through it, those chords, that's looped, I think. Actually, it's not. Oh no, I think I was playing it over and over, so that's not looped actually. Cool. And then the guitar section, the guitar that's looped. And different guitar layers. It'd be cool to the guitar. So all the guitar layers, like once I'd come up with the bits, like all the interlocking parts, yeah, just loop them as well.
Nice one, thank you. Question here, thank you.
Hi, you mentioned artists like B52 and Joy Division, but when starting any process of an album or songs in general, do you have any artists or like music you listen to, or is it something that has to come just from within?
I think it depends. Like there was really like specific music that I was listening to when I was trying to make this album. One of the main things was just Jeff Buckley, Grace. I was listening to that so much, and there's I don't think my music sounds anything like his, but there's something in it. You know, sometimes it's not about like listening to something that you want to try and emulate or feel inspired by sonically, but it's more about like the feeling or like the aspirational quality of it. Like when I was driving up to Scotland, for example, it was a 10-hour drive, and I just listened to Grace on repeat the whole way. I don't know if anyone else listens to music like that, but sometimes I'll just listen to one, something just deep. And every time you listen to it, you hear new things. And for me, that's an album that I used to listen to a lot as a teenager. And then I didn't listen to him for ages. But a couple of years ago, I was trying to show my little sister some cool music to listen to, and so we were just having a YouTube session, and I typed in Jeff Buckley, and then I was like, oh my god, you know what, the first time round it was pre-YouTube and I've actually not really seen videos of him, and then I just got like re-obsessed. But yeah, that album for me, it's like there's so much emotion and depth and just like all like really nice like sonic intricacies as well in the production and arrangement. So sometimes you listen to that and things and you just feel like, wow, like that person creates something so beautiful, and I want to just try everything that I can do to create something that, just like in following in the footsteps, and not necessarily sonically, but more just about like the feeling of it. But my most recent obsession, which is really, I also think their music is aspirational, is Prefab Sprout. I never listened to them until last year, and now I'm going on like an absolute deep dive with all their records. And, I want to say inspirational, but I think aspirational is a better way of describing it, because the arrangement, the production, the songwriting, all the kind of like little catchy bits, it's just like, it's incredible. And anyone who knows, like who makes music knows like how hard it is to just make one track that you're happy with that flows. Like it's difficult. So yeah, so that's and also listening to Prefab Sprouts made me think more about space as well, the space in between. I'm going to be thinking about that more in my music.
And also it's slightly further down the 80s. You're kind of on the 81, 82 right now. Now you're kind of 84, 85. Yeah, exactly. So cool.
Maybe by my fifth album in 1995.
No, I mean, I think there's some, as you've said, there's some amazing, the 80s was a really defining era for music, not just in terms of, composition and ideas, but just obviously the technology was a huge influence on that, Yeah. Thank you for your question. Cool, go for it, yeah.
Hey, did you ever find it difficult or intimidating entering the music industry space as a woman of South Asian heritage who creates sort of like more alternative indie music?
Well, when you're not the status quo, there's always going to be moments where you feel like things happen to you or you get treated a certain way because of who you are. I don't think that will ever go away. But I never like to dwell on those things, because I feel like it's too draining and it's not worth it. I get asked similar questions like that a lot, and like over the last 10 years of doing music, being on different panels and different discussions where people are like, oh, how does it feel to be this? And you hear people that can get quite bogged down in it, and I get it, because there is a lot of crap that you have to deal with, really. but I feel like I could just kind of focus on that and like focus on the negativity and like moan about it and criticize people and say like, oh, why didn't this happen? Why didn't that go my way? Oh, is it because I'm brown? And is it because I'm a female? Or just use all that energy and just like put it in your work. And that's like the only thing worth doing, really, because what I've realized is that on the industry side, yeah, there's loads of structures, there's a lot of people who aren't maybe like the most welcoming or the most understanding or the most accommodating. I don't want to generalize, because at the same time there are people who are amazing and, you know, and who really support my work, and some of those people are like straight white men who are the status quo, and so you can't ever generalize about it. Like I find it very frustrating when people do that. You know, there's good people everywhere, but when you put this last year of putting out the album and just seeing like the music going on its own journey and touring all around the world and seeing people come to the shows and supporting me in that way, in places that I've never been to before, and honestly, like, it's been insane. Like the amount, like the queues at the end of people who want to talk to me and tell me about like what the music means to them and all these things, like that gives you energy, and that makes you realize like there's nothing that can stop that. Like if you're true to your art and you just work on it and you put it out, if you get the chance to release a record, whatever it is, and yeah, if you're just true to your work, I feel like it will just come back to you, and you don't have to worry about the haters or like the people who are just not doing the job that they're supposed to do. And I could really talk about a lot of things like that. There's a lot of anecdotes, but the anecdotes that I want to focus on are just like the things that are actually making this dream of doing music, which is my favorite thing in the world, a reality that I never planned to do. And it's literally just the people who love the music, and there's nothing in between that. And now with the internet as well, like all the middlemen are basically cut out. And I think that's really why a lot of record labels and other like industry organizations are freaked out a little bit, because you have people who go viral and you have artists who have like 50 million views on YouTube and they don't have a record deal or anything, and it's just really like the power of music. So yeah, it's hard, it's really hard. And the other thing is like everyone sees the Instagram side of it and everyone's like, oh, you're smashing it, you're touring all around the world, and I'm grateful for all of those things, but behind the scenes it's so intense, because like when you're a musician, you're self-employed, you're your own boss. Like no one's telling you to meet a deadline, no one's saying, oh, you've got to do this by this time, if you don't you're going to get fired, or you're getting paid this much every month. None of that. So it's all up to you. Like you have to motivate yourself, you have to really like be I don't know, it's hard. Like the financial thing is hard, especially this last year. It's the first time I've put a band together, and touring with a band is really expensive. And I don't know, there's times where I'm like freaking out because I'm like, how am I going to pay my rent? And that's still literally like a reality. Somehow I'm just like thankful to God and the universe and the power of music that I've just managed. Somehow, like even when there's moments where I'm like, oh my God, like PRS got paid last week and I was like, oh, finally. just, you know, just, I don't know, some things happen and it falls into place somehow, but it's so difficult. And I'm always like, when is the grind section gonna end? Maybe never, but I just gotta keep going.
It just morphs.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for your question. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the mixing and mastering side of it. But before we get to that, at what point did you say, you know what, I've got enough tracks for Dreamer now, I'm going to the next stage, which is the mixing and mastering, you know?
On my last day of the residency, actually, because I finished re-recording the vocals for this and I felt like I needed one more track that I wanted to put on the album that didn't exist yet. And then the last track I made for the record was A Tender Victory. And yeah, I don't know, I made that just in one go. Just like I sat down and I was like, I need to do this. And somehow like the idea just came to me, and that was the final track. You know, up till that point, like all the other tracks had been there, just listening to everything, figuring out like some kind of order or whatever it was, like a kind of overall idea. And yeah, so it must have been the end of, or the start of November, like November 2022. Yeah, yeah.
And you're saying the mixing process was, you know, once you'd obviously taken on Jim, you know, the process was quite intense, you're saying?
Yeah, so it's the same with the first album. I don't know, like finished it, and then the label was like, okay, well, if you want to release it at this time, you need to deliver everything by this point, because it's going to take 4 months for vinyl to get pressed. And so between finishing it and having to deliver it, I think I had like a month. And that's not a very long time at all. You know, some people can go really like back and forth a lot on mixing. I did that, but in like a really concentrated time. And for this album, Dreamer, I worked with a mixing engineer called John Catlin, and he's based at Battery Studios in Willesden Green. And he was actually recommended to me by John Davis, who mastered my album. He mastered the first one as well, because I wanted to work with Steve again, but he wasn't available or something. Yeah, he couldn't do it. So yeah, so I had never worked with John Catlin before. He's younger, different approach. The biggest difference between working with both of them was that when I worked with Steve, he asked for all of the stems totally dry. So like without anything that I'd put on them. And he listened to my like rough mixes as a reference and then did everything from scratch again. Yeah. Through all of like the outboard gear in his studio, which was really cool to watch and like see how it was built up. Whereas John asked me for all the wet stems. So like I gave
separately or in the actual stems themselves?
Like he just asked for, he used that as his starting point. Yeah. So like with all the effects that I'd already put on, he used that as a starting point. But then he'd ask for some stuff dry, like maybe some of the some of the drums or some of the vocals. And then I sat in with him for the whole mixing process. I think we did it again in about like 12 days or something. Yeah, it's intense.
And what was the most transformative thing about, you know, watching, you know, what you had as the, you know, really good demos to then seeing the mixing process and, you know, seeing this other result?
I think it was really emotional because it took me so long to make it. I'm so attached to the music. The one track which like, it was just the first track on the album, In Light, which I think it might be my favorite one. And it's about my friend who died. That one, we worked on it first for mixing and then also for mastering. So that one I saw, like I heard the finished version first. And yeah, it just made me cry like in the studio because I felt really happy about it. No, it felt good to like hear it in a different way, like enhanced and like on a different sound system, and someone else putting in their like love and care and effort into the track to kind of like make the vision come to life. So yeah.
And no tracks were, you know, was it a fluid process or was there tracks that were particularly challenging to mix?
There were some things that were a bit challenging. I think maybe it comes down to people hearing things slightly differently. So there's definitely some back and forth on the way that I wasn't happy with. And I remember Closer Lover was a really tricky one. I wasn't happy with like the balance of like the different guitar parts. And that it took some back and forth. And also maybe also This World Couldn't See Us. Yeah, there were a few, but we got there in the end. And I always like, listen, I always make like really detailed notes. That's the only way that you can remember. So like I'd sit down, I had one notebook for the whole album. And in that, I wanted to bring it today, but I didn't get time to go to my studio. But in that, so when I'd listen to the mixed drafts, just go through it and literally note down like everything that was coming into my head about like, no, this doesn't sound right, or this should be a bit different. Because first of all, when you listen to it for the first time, that's when it all stands out to you. The more you listen to it, the less you'll notice. And if you don't write it down, then you're never going to remember all the things. So, so I'd do that and then I'd go back in and just do it. And You know, it's the question that a girl asked me before, like, do you ever feel like intimidated in a space? I think sometimes you could feel like, oh, am I being too difficult? Maybe I shouldn't give one more round of feedback. Maybe he's right. Maybe it sounds better this way. I should just go with it. No, because the person who knows best is you. And like, you should never feel like, oh, well, he's been mixing for this long and he works in this massive studio with all these other people. If it doesn't feel right to you, you have to say it. You have to say it, because then that's the moment. And most of the time, they're not going to be like, oh, she's being so annoying. They'll get it. And they tell me stories about like crazy things, like people asking for like 100 different mixes. But that's from like diva acts. Like I would not be like that ever, because that's just, what's the point? But just, you've got to just be like, no, the vocals need to be EQ'd a bit differently. This doesn't sound right. Whatever it is, just make sure the finished product you're happy with. Because if you're not, every time you listen back to it when it's out, you're going to think about it and it will annoy you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on that, I think what's really unique about your music and your output is this kind of, you're essentially navigating two prime worlds. There's there's almost like a shoegaze world that's very kind of like, guitar focused and spatial, almost like Cocteau Twinsy. That's what it reminds me of when I kind of listen to it. And then there's obviously the electronic stuff, the dance floor stuff, which traditionally you would mix a Cocteau Twins record or a B-52s record in a completely different way to, say, an electronic dance music record. And you're kind of in the middle. So during the mixing process, so you kind of conscious about these different these two distinct styles and mix them appropriately, or do you just try and get this general sound for the record, like the Nabihah sound, if that makes sense?
This was something that I was thinking about, like once all the tracks were kind of done, and I was like, wow, okay, there's like two kind of directions that the music's moving in, and some of it's a lot more electronic focused and some of it is way more guitar focused. But then I felt like the motif that drew the whole thing together was my voice, and also just like the feelings in the music, because I felt like the level of emotion for me anyway, like that I'm trying to put through the music, was as much in the electronic clubby tracks as it was in the kind of like textured shoegazy, like epic guitar tracks as well. So I didn't feel like, oh, this is too different. In the mixing, I was really just trying to think about like getting each track right. So maybe approaching it in a more individualistic way, and then being like, okay, this is how it has to sound, because the sound palette is pretty different. For example, if you compare A Tender Victory to Gentle Heart or Sunflower, like it's so different. But the layers and the textures and the feeling is all still in both of those tracks. But for example, with Gentle Heart, it's like, the drums on that, like really clubby, and like the kick is so big and fat, and like I just wanted that to be in there to try and make people dance, because that's a song about dancing and clubbing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how's it feel a year on? Your record's been out, you've done this amazing tour that's given you lots of great memories and things to think about. Where are you going to go with those feelings and thoughts and experiences from here?
Well, I don't even know. I mean, it's just so much to take in, because this last year, it's like basically playing shows non-stop. The only week I didn't have gigs was Christmas. So it was a lot. And I mean, mostly it was live stuff, but then I was also still DJing a bit. So I think that's why the calendar was so full. And I had to do the DJ gigs to just like supplement the income, because like doing the live shows is like not making any money on them really. It was just like it's just been a dream. Like I need to have some time to just process it all, because it was just so much. Like touring America for the first time, and like just playing in all these places I haven't been to before, selling out the whole Australia tour, and I never played live there, and just the Europe tour, and at each show just having like the most beautiful crowds who I could tell were really into the music, and a lot of people wanting to share their own stories with me afterwards about like their own relationship to the music and what it meant to them. And after every gig, I'd always just go to the merch stand to like sell the merch. Like sign records if someone wanted me to sign. But then I would also just be like, if you want to come and say hi, just come and say hi. And I'm not saying this in like a trying to big myself up where, I'm just saying it because this is literally what happened. But there was just so many people that wanted to talk to me, and the stories were just crazy. Like on the last show of the January tour in USA where we played in Denver, there was a woman who came. She came by herself. She was a bit older. And she was Ukrainian American, and she'd handmade me this really amazing like Ukrainian flower crown, and then wrote me a letter and a poem. And she told me that her husband, that she was married to for 37 years, died in September, and she just went into like the most insane depression. And she said the only thing that helped her was my album. And to come out of that, and then to also then start making things again. And she was like, I had to make you this. She was like, this is the first time I've been out like at night to something because I had to come and see you play. And then I don't even know what you say back to someone like that, because I don't even know what it would feel like to lose someone that you've been together with for that long. But then, you know, even if it was just one person who said that to me, I feel like I'm doing the right thing, because that we all love music, so we all know exactly what it feels like when there's like a song or an album or an artist that you love so much because the music makes you feel a certain way, and maybe it's linked to certain memories or experiences in your life. So for me, it's just surreal that people are now saying that kind of thing to me about my music, but it makes it all feel like totally worthwhile. And you know, every show I've seen people crying, and that's just a really crazy thing to see. And people also just knowing all the words and singing along. It's just weird. It's just weird. But yeah, it's just been amazing. So obviously touring has been like so exhausting. Financially, it is it's just like unsustainable unless something will change soon. I don't know. But it's worth it because of the feeling that I get of performing live, especially with my band. And that's been a new thing for me as well. And then just seeing the people there and talking to them. And I couldn't, like, even if I never played another show ever again, I would just feel happy from everything that's happened so far. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you very, very much for your time. It's been so special. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Give it up, man.
Thank you to you as well.